Well, welcome back to another session of Confident Parenting. Jim and I are so excited that you're with us on this journey. Now, in this session, Jim, we're going to be talking about the parent's responsibility in faith development.
Well, as Doug mentioned in the previous session, too many of us try to parent by circumstance and chance. I know that Kathy and I have done that throughout our parenting, and yet we know better. Well, oftentimes we find ourselves trying to just make things up as we go along. I mean, isn't that what a lot of us do? But fortunately, there's a roadmap available, and it's in the Bible. Let me ask you a question. If we took time to really question this, most people wouldn't get this. What's the most often quoted scripture in the Bible? Now, if you're sitting around a table with a lot of people, or if you're even at your church, you might say John 3:16. Maybe you'll say Psalm 23. But I know this to be true, that the most often quoted scripture in the Bible is Deuteronomy 6:4-9. And the reason it is because the Jews call it the Shema. And the Shema means, literally in Hebrew, to listen. But it's the plan and the purpose, and it's actually the roadmap for the Hebrew people. Here's what it says. And by the way, as I'm reading this, if you were in an Orthodox Jewish synagogue, everybody would stand because they all know it. They all memorize it. It's said every morning in an Orthodox Jewish home. It is said every evening in an Orthodox Jewish home. Every Sabbath in an Orthodox Jewish synagogue. Here it is. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be written upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Well, you talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Now again, this is called the Shema, and in the Orthodox Jewish tradition, it is the Holy of Holies, but it's also the roadmap. It teaches us three things. It teaches us, first and foremost, loyalty to God, that there is one God and we're to love Him with everything we have. Secondly, it teaches us how to transmit faith and love to our children. How do we do that? Well, in that scripture it says, put it into your hearts and then impress it on your children. So in other words, we're the role models. So we impress it in our hearts, and then we impress it on our children. That's the way faith is transferred. Many of us try to get that all confused because we think it's just the job of the church. It's not really our job. We take them to church. But what we find within the Jewish tradition, which is really the right way to do this in terms of a roadmap, is that we live it out, we impress it on our children. Thirdly, is it teaches us how to have a constant mindfulness of the teachings and the presence of God. And basically, it's bringing the presence of God into our home. What I mean by that is it says when you get up, when you go to bed, when you walk along the road, that might be with your SUV, but actually bringing the presence of God, bringing the teaching and having faith conversations with your kids in a more natural way. It goes on to say that you take it to work because you do it with your hands. It says that you put it into your mind because you put it on your forehead, it says, and into your mind. And then you even, for them, they would have something called a mezuzah, and it's on the side. It's on the side of a door, on a gate. And they would basically say, and you see this all over Israel, the presence of God is welcome here. So for an Orthodox Jew, it's really an understanding that it's the job of the parents to impress faith on children, not just, well, for them the synagogue, for us the church.
I want you to imagine for a moment that Jesus is a baby. He's being rocked in Mary's arms, and he's hearing her recite the Shema. No doubt it was the first scripture that Jesus ever heard, and he heard it recited every day. As Jim said, it was repeated in the homes of Orthodox Jews daily. There was a time in the ministry of Jesus where Jesus was actually asked, what is the most important commandment? You see, they were testing him with this question. And when Jesus gave the answer, he went directly to the plan and the purpose of the Hebrew people. Some have termed these words the Jesus Creed, and you may recognize this scripture. They asked, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Now, what's helpful to understand about this is that every Jew in that day would have answered the same question with the words of the Shema. Again, it was the plan and the purpose of family life and faith for the Jewish people. And one of the key components of being a confident parent is that we've got to teach the ways of Jesus to our kids. We introduce you to the Shema and to the Jesus Creed because we want parents to understand that really discipleship begins in the home, that we cannot outsource faith development like we outsource tutoring and sports lessons and piano. The church can help and they can come alongside of the parents, but teaching our children to fall in love with Jesus and to follow His ways, that's the primary responsibility of the parent. You know, Jim, as parents, we need help because it's really a scary responsibility to be in charge of the faith development of our kids. It's scary because there's so many negative studies that are out there that reveal that kids are leaving the church when they graduate from high school, but there's also positive studies. And there are studies that state that there's a 300% better chance that kids are actually going to stay in the church and maintain their faith if they have regular, healthy faith conversations in their home while they're growing up. And this is a great place for us parents to start. And so, Jim, tell us what a faith conversation is.
Okay, and it's a stunning statistic, by the way, but a faith conversation is not necessarily preaching or lecturing. And we tend to go in that direction probably too often, or we tend to just do silence because we're hoping that the church does it, because none of us feel confident within the way we would transfer faith because maybe we're not living it out. The home is a tough place. But when you look at a faith conversation, it's really a more natural conversation, a dialogue. That's much better. And remember that these faith conversations aren't necessarily just Bible studies. Bible study is great, but it's also an opportunity to help our kids integrate their faith into their life and sometimes dialogue. Kids learn best when they talk, not when we talk. So we want to develop conversations. And actually, we all do that with so many other things. Let me give you an illustration of a faith conversation. This one actually is out of the Denver Post. I read this in the Denver Post, newspaper. And I think it's a great way of probably for maybe more middle school or high school kids, but I think it's a good illustration. Here it is. I read this. As far as Regina Hammond is concerned, luck had little to do with it. The 37-year-old flight attendant won $100,000 in the Colorado lottery. And the year before, she had run $50,000 the same exact way. And she says she's not finished with it yet. Now she's going for the multi-million-dollar prize. You share this with your kids. Hammond believes that prayer has paved her way to the riches. She said, and this was in the newspaper, "I pray to God to help me, and He answers the prayer." Well, that's the story. You stop right there because you're trying to get your kids to learn to discern and learn to think on their own. So I would say to the kids, okay, you have three choices. One is, do you believe God answered her prayer to help her win that money? There would be maybe some kids who would. No, God didn't answer her prayer. Plus, they may even have trouble with the lottery. Or third, you're just undecided. And then now you have a dialogue going. And is there a right answer or a wrong answer? I mean, some parents would believe that there is, but kids are going to have their conversation, and then they're going to say something like, what does the Scripture say? So it becomes a great conversation and a great teaching on prayer. Obviously, you could do Bible studies, and there are things where you study the life and teachings of Jesus, so many other things. But let me give you another illustration. Sex education is a great faith conversation. Now, all studies show that the more positive, value-centered sex education kids receive from home, the less promiscuous they'll be. So what we're talking about here is dialogue, not just a one conversation, but it's dialogue. Are they sometimes awkward conversations? Sure. But again, when parents are involved, all studies show that it's the best. And the statistic that you gave was stunning, that loads of kids are leaving. In fact, some would say 65% of the kids who were raised in the church leave the church after high school, but there is a 300% better chance. So we talk about these things. So make discipleship a part of your mindset. It's as ancient as the Shema and as up to date as dealing with any family issue your family has.
Well, basically what we're saying today is that discipleship happens in the home. No parent is confident when it comes to developing a purpose and a plan, but a parent who recognizes their God-given opportunity to train up their children is going to make a lasting difference in the life of their kids.
And again, we're so thankful that we have a chance to be with you in this Confident Parenting series, and we're looking forward to being with you again next time.